Well, good morning, everybody. On a foggy morning here, September 10th. This is our downtown regular parking committee meeting. Can I have a roll call, please?
Committee member Ed Franz,
Here.
Sean Pratt,
I'm here.
Andrew Newkirk,
Here.
Matt Labrie,
Here.
and Chair Pinner.
Here.
Thank you.
Well, again, good morning. Just a reminder to everybody, if you have a comment that you'd like to make, just turn on your camera and I'll recognize you. We're getting pretty good at doing this by video, although it's frustrating as heck to do so. But thank you all for being here this morning and keeping these important things of the city going that we need to. Any changes to the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair, there are no changes to the agenda.
Okay. At this time, we're on item number 4 of the agenda, public comment. This is when members of the public wishing to address the committee on something in the jurisdiction of the committee, but not currently on the agenda, may do so. And I'll let Sarah explain how to do that.
Sure, if I could just get the slide for public comment. So if any member of the public would like to make comment on an item, please use the raise lower your hand button that's located in your dashboard module, and we will notify you when it's your turn to speak. I'd ask that attendees please refrain from using the questions in the poll or the chat functions. We want to do everything out loud on the record here so that we can, for the benefit of the entire group. So we do at this time, I see one hand raised. That's Anna Marie Gott. Ms. Gott, I'm unmuted. You should be able to speak.
Good morning, committee members. I actually just want to talk about one thing, and that one thing is when the report or any like draft policies, such as the one that you have on your agenda today, are actually uploaded and posted to the website for your committee. As you know, trying to get public input in many cases is quite difficult, and the public does need to have access to any documents that staff actually is going to be presenting at a meeting, or policies that might be, recommended for review. In the case of the policy that is on your agenda today, it was not published until the 8th. Anyone who actually wanted to find out any information about the policy had less than 48 hours in which to read it and make comments. And in many cases, finding out information like this in the middle of the week makes it almost impossible for anyone to write a letter. So I would really recommend that the committee demand that if staff is going to produce a report or offer a policy in which they are recommending that this board pass on to the city council or any other board, that it be published with the agenda. It's really not fair for the public to be blindsided in basically the middle of the week with policies that should have been posted well in advance of the meeting. So this is certainly under your purview, and I would really request that, in the effort to be transparent and open, that you make this change and you require this of staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other members of the public wishing to speak at this time?
Okay. Mr. Chair, I don't see any other raised hands right now.
Okay, thank you. Seeing none, we'll close public comment at this time. And we'll move to item number 5 of the agenda, the approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of August 13th, 2020. Do I have a motion?
I'll move approval.
I have a first, Mr. Newkirk. Is that a second from you, Mr. Labrie? Okay, I have a first and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? As usual, now we have to do a roll call vote. So if we could just do that quickly, please.
Committee member Ed France,
Approve.
Sean Pratt,
Approve.
Andrew Newkirk,
Yes.
Matt Labrie,
Yes.
and Trey Pinner.
Yes. Thank you, everybody. Okay. On to our new items for the agenda. Item number 6, automated license plate recognition policy. Mr. Dayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm just going to give a short introduction on what we're calling LPR or ALPR, license plate recognition. This is a really standard thing in the parking industry. It's a tool that reads license plates. It has a really high-end customer service, and that's all going to be talked about. But in doing all that and introducing something that actually takes personal information off a license plate, it's really important that we have a policy that protects personal information. And so we have been working in concert with the airport and with the waterfront, and we have waterfront staff on the call as well today on this item. But we've been working with those three departments on a policy that would protect public information because LPR does take personal information, it lifts the plate and uses it, as you'll discover. This item right now is coming before you because the downtown parking eventually would like to purchase LPR technology to improve customer service and our low touch or contactless services that we provide in the parking facilities. This would be going to council in the future upon your recommendation. So without further ado, I think we have Sarah giving the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob, and good morning, Chair and committee members. I'm Sarah Clark, the Parking Program Supervisor, and today I'm going to walk you through the proposed or the draft automated license plate recognition policy for the city of Santa Barbara. And this is not just for downtown parking. This is for any parking facility for use of ALPR in any parking facility that the city operates. And so we are submitting this policy to council jointly with the airport and waterfront departments. We do have people from those departments here today. So if they want to pipe in and add anything, or if you have questions for them, we can address those. Also, John Doimus from the City Attorney's Office is going to be joining us for the presentation as well. He can speak to the legal issues surrounding the policy. So we've talked about automated license plate recognition, or ALPR or LPR as we sometimes refer to it, in this committee before. And there can be a lot of benefits to ALPR. A lot of park systems these days, as parking access and revenue control systems, do come equipped with ALPR technology. And that's because of the benefits to customer safety that it can provide, improved customer service via reduced wait times at entrance and exit, because the gate can just go up automatically, for example, if there's no fee due, or if the fee has already been paid via a mobile app or a pay station. It can reduce or eliminate the need for lost ticket penalties, because when your license plate becomes your ticket, it's much harder to lose that. And it can also facilitate the use of different payment options, such as mobile payment or pay on foot options, or a pay by plate option for a lot, for example, that isn't gated. The use of ALPR systems can improve revenue collection. It can prevent the abuse of the complimentary period, Everybody knows that the first 75 minutes you're parked in one of our downtown lots are free. But what fewer people know is that technically you're only supposed to get one of those free periods a day. So we know that people sometimes cycle their vehicles to take advantage of that free period, and having your license plate become your ticket can prevent that cycling and can improve our recovery of those revenues. It can also simplify our billing process that we use for when like people don't have money to pay upon exit and we have to issue a fee due envelope, for example. First off, we have fewer of those because we're not doing lost ticket fees, but also it's an easier process. We're not having to have somebody transcribe a license plate onto a piece of paper and then somebody in the office then read that. So that becomes an easier process there. It can also improve permit program management and the use of permit parking in the lots. Your license plate can become your permit, so you're reducing that sort of administrative burden to people to come in and to have their card and possibly lose their card, as well as the cost of that for our program. And that can also enhance enforcement of parking restrictions. So if we can move to the next slide. So again, ALPR stands for Automated License Plate Recognition, and the way that it generally works is that, or at least in a parking application, license plate recognition can be used for a number of different things, but to be clear, this policy and what we're talking about today only relates to the use of ALPR for parking operations and management, nothing beyond that. And the way that generally works is that license plates capture, or that cameras are fixed at the entrances and exits of parking lots. They capture an image of the license plate as a vehicle drives through. That image gets fed through an algorithm which uses optical character recognition to convert that image into computer readable data. And that data then becomes basically your ticket. So it can be used depending on the type of system you use. And we're not talking about any specific system here today. Different ALPR systems work a bit differently, but it can be used in addition to or in place of a customer's entrance ticket to determine the time and location that they entered and calculate the fees due upon exit. Or in the case of a permit holder, to just allow them to pass without having to pay. So, as we discussed, this kind of technology is becoming more and more popular because it can really streamline management of a parking operation and improve customer service. So next slide. So why are we here today and why are we discussing this policy specifically? The California Civil Code requires the city or any LPR, ALPR operator to adopt a privacy policy that protects the public and protects the users of your parking lot by ensuring that the collection, management, use, maintenance, sharing, and dissemination of any ALPR data protects privacy, protects user security, and protects civil liberties. So we are required by law to adopt a policy that protects the users of our parking system should we use ALPR. And the law also requires us to provide this, to make this policy available for public review, to post it on our website if we have it, and for the public to review and to comment on the policy at City Council. So this will be going to City Council for their review and comment on the 29th, provided this committee is on board with that. So slide, please. So under the California Civil Code, which requires us to adopt this policy, there are some requirements that are laid out for what the policy has to contain and how public agencies can use this data. And John can pipe in if he's got, if he has anything that he wants to add here. So first off, legally, we are prohibited from selling or sharing ALPR data except with other agencies. Operators are required to maintain reasonable security processes and practices, including administrative technical safeguards to protect that ALPR information from unauthorized access. And we have to, again, create privacy policies that are consistent with respect for privacy and civil liberties. So John, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, that was pretty much covered. These laws, which Sarah said came under the California Civil Code, was codified in the end of 2015, so became operative in 2016. And the main point is to make this process as public as possible with public knowledge. So that's done in two ways. As Sarah mentioned, this has to be, the policy has to, and the approval of installing this has to be done by a governing body. That would be City Council. and it has to be made public, the policy. So many cities have their policy, all the cities who operate this have it online available for people to see in terms of what's being stored, how it's being stored, the security measures, and how records can be retained and what's exempt from that. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so specifically, at a minimum, again, per the California Civil Code, these ALPR policies must describe the purpose of the system, our data retention policies, what we store and how long we store it, how that data would be shared or sold, if it would be shared or sold, who is authorized to access that system and access that data once we've collected it, what the training requirements are for those authorized users, what steps we will take to protect user data, and how data accuracy will be ensured and errors will be corrected, because these cameras don't always read 100%. So we need to make sure that before we're taking any action based on an ALPR read, we're verifying that it was in fact correct. Slide. So I'm just going to walk you through some of the main points of the policy that we've proposed, which you have again attached to your staff report for your review. So authorized uses. So this policy, like I said, it's specific to parking operations and compliance. It only relates to use of ALPR, and only allows use of ALPR in this case for parking management and for use in parking operations. It prohibits us from using ALPR data to monitor individual activities or activities that are otherwise protected by the First Amendment. It prohibits us from using ALPR cameras where there would be a reasonable expectation of privacy. So, you know, in places that are, for example, off of city property or outside of the public right of way where you would otherwise have a reasonable expectation of privacy, we would not be using any sort of ALPR cameras or collection. Next slide. It also defines the authorized users. In this case, again, we have parking operations at the airport, public works departments, and waterfront department. And in each of those departments, use is limited to staff who are responsible for parking operations and management, not you know, the sort of hourly staff who are out in the kiosks, but the office staff who are on the management side. And those different positions are listed out in the policy. Also, parking contractors and vendors is needed. The airport, for example, contracts with a third party to operate their parking system. So obviously they would need to have access to that information as well. Each program has designated an official program manager for downtown parking. That would be Victor Garza, our parking plaza, our downtown plaza and parking manager. And they are sort of the person who's in charge of implementing this policy and the person who's responsible for ensuring the safety and security of the system. Next slide. The training requirements, all authorized users, so any of the people who are on that list of authorized users must receive training prior to being given access to the system, and the training relates to, again, the authorized uses of the data and privacy protection. And then each year there's a refresher training for anybody who has access to the system. Next slide, please. So, you know, obviously a big priority for ALPR systems is maintaining system security. And so, you know, to those ends, the policy states that the system must store information about all logins and queries to access the data. So anytime one of those authorized users logs into the system, that information is captured and it's stored. And that is so we can go back later and audit that information and make sure that people who are querying the system and who are accessing license plate data are only doing so for authorized uses, and only authorized people are accessing that system. So that would be audited and monitored by the program manager. Just to be clear, the ALPR data that we capture, it's just a license plate. It's not actually matched to any personal information. In order to do that, we would have to hook into the DMV system and collect that data, and that's not what we're doing. So when we capture the license plate data with ALPR, in this case, we're only seeing that license plate number. We're not seeing, you know, this is the license plate, it belongs to, you know, Sue Smith, who lives at X address. So we don't see that personal information. We're only seeing the license plate itself. So go ahead, next slide. It also, so the policy also outlines the parameters for the sale, sharing, or transfer of ALPR data. And the city's policy prohibits us from selling, publishing, exchanging, or disclosing data, ALPR data for commercial purposes at all. So that's completely prohibited. Unauthorized disclosure or publication is prohibited, and dissemination of the data to unauthorized persons is prohibited. Basically, the only disclosure of ALPR data that we are authorized to do under the policy is to provide that information to law enforcement agencies if they present us with a subpoena, or to another public agency that has the legal authority to compel us to provide that data. So the only time this information would be disclosed is when it is required for us to do that by law. Okay, next slide, please. So as I discussed a bit earlier, we do need to make sure that that our data is accurate before we take any sort of action on it. For example, if somebody failed to pay a fee and we were going to send them a bill for that, we'd obviously want to make sure that it was their correct license plate before we did that. So we'll be reviewing that for accuracy anytime that we are intending to take action on that, and just making sure the data matches up with the actual image capture. Next slide, please. Data will be retained per the policy for 30 days. It will be purged after 30 days, so we'll only have it stored for a limited period of time. We would only retain the information, the ALPR data, longer than that when we are required by law. So again, if we have some sort of legal order requirement to hang on to that data, we would do that. And John can speak a bit more to that. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to hand it over to John, who's going to talk about what our requirements are under this policy for when there is a breach of personal information.
Correct. Thank you, Sarah. The California Civil Code essentially provides an exemplary form, which we are going to use and what's contained in that policy. And so when we have breaches with certain information provided, so if it's social security numbers, driver's license, as you see there, financial accounts or medical information, we would provide that information with that breach. I have looked to see how many breaches that have occurred in this and requiring the form. There haven't been really any up and down the state, but we will follow that process under the Civil Code and provide that information to those who've had a breach in terms of what was disclosed, how it was disclosed, how they can protect themselves from that. Thank you. There's a copy of exactly of what the form I was talking about involves right there. So that would be given to you. And this type of form, which is, again, from the code, would be provided to anyone who had any type of breach.
Okay, and so that's sort of an overview of what the policy outlines and how it requires us to handle ALPR data should we collect it. Mr. Chairman, if you or the committee have any questions.
Thank you, Sarah. Anyone of the committee have any questions of staffs at this point? Mr. Newkirk.
Thank you, Chair Penner. This might be a question for Mr. Doimus, but are these under the Public Records Act, are these captures considered city records? And then if so, does the civil codes like 1798, I don't know, 90.51 or some other part of the civil code serve as the exemption from Public Records Act disclosures, or where exactly are we confident that these are not disclosable public records?
Thank you for that. There have been some case law. The ACLU, along with the Los Angeles Times, has sued the LA City Department, the City of Los Angeles on this issue. The Civil Code just provides for cities to develop a privacy policy. What can be released to the public can be, if a record's maintained, if we believe this would fall under Government Code Section 6255 of the Public Records Act, if the privacy interests of those individuals outweighs the public's right to know. Generally, this information is private, and that would be argued by the city that people's private license plate numbers would be private, and we follow that in terms of our privacy procedure, our policy procedure. In fact, who can have access to these records, who can provide it, we would require a subpoena or a warrant. We wouldn't even share this with our own police department. We would require them to obtain a warrant if they would want records for this. And we do the same for even our public library. Library circulation records are deemed under the Public Records Act private information. So if the police department would want that, they cannot simply just ask our city library for that. They would actually have to obtain a warrant. And so that is the position we're taking on this.
And then I had a question for maybe Rob and Sarah. We're being asked to recommend this, the adoption of this at City Council. Are we recommending the adoption to apply to the airport and the waterfront as well? Or are we recommending this for use in downtown parking facilities?
That's a great question, Commander Burke. Yeah, it's just downtown parking is your purview, so you'd only recommend within your purview.
Thanks.
Yeah, the policy is being submitted jointly by those 3 departments, but as Mr. Dayton said, your purview is only downtown parking.
Thank you, Mr. Newkirk. Does anyone else on the committee have a question for staff? Sarah and Rob, I have a question. You talk about it doesn't communicate with DMV, or we don't have access to DMV, but if we have a fee due situation and that needs to be communicated out to somebody, how is that going to be handled?
Yes, so it would be handled essentially the same way that we currently handle those things. Right now, as anybody who has left our parking lot and not had forgotten their wallet knows, we issue an IOU, and that includes your license plate number. So if we don't receive payment on that IOU within the specified period, it's 10 days, then we would bill you for that. And the way that we get that information, so we take that license plate and we get the registered owner information, is through the DMV. So we request that data from the DMV and they give it to us. So it would be a similar system for ALPR. We would only have the data stored as a license plate with no user information associated with that, unless and until there was a need to, to affect further collection of information.
To be clear, we're already doing that basically, right? We already are sending out, if someone has not paid timely, we are doing basically that process now.
That's correct. Yeah. So it would just be a little smoother. Again, we wouldn't be translating from something handwritten. We'd have the information already in a database. And depending on what system we use, some of the different parking management systems integrate better with the DMV. But that's not information that, again, we have ready access to. It's something that we have to go out and get. So if we have an ALPR system and somebody drives into our lot and it captures their license plate, we don't know that Johnny Parker just drove into our lot. That's not information that we get. It's just a number.
Okay. And one other question. Do we have an idea of how many, I know we've discussed this before when we've talked about fees, but how many lost tickets we have in a year? Is there an estimate?
I do not know. Megan Salas is on the line. She previously worked a lot with our violations billing. She might be able to give you some statistics on that.
What?
With information?
Hi, sorry. I don't have a number readily available for that, but I would estimate it's a couple per day. We don't end up having to bill for all of those because many people do pay within the 10 days that they have to pay. But we do bill for a significant portion of them.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on that. I mean, I certainly know my frustration if I think I've lost my ticket, I don't know where it might be, and knowing that I would be charged that larger number because of a lost ticket, I certainly understand the benefit of knowing that basically my ticket will not be lost in any way, shape, or form. under a license plate recognition program. So thank you. Okay. Do we have any other members of the committee wishing to ask questions of staff? Hearing none, I think at this time, we'd like to make a motion. We're looking, no? We're just,
You'd like to take public comment?
oh, yes. Oh, it's so hard to remember that when I don't see public in front of me. I apologize. Thank you.
We do have one member of the public who wishes to speak.
Thank you.
Anna Marie Gott, I have unmuted you. You can go ahead. I believe we have 2 minutes.
Hi, this is Anna Marie Gott. I actually forwarded you a letter just before the meeting. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get it to you before because the policy was not put up until about 36 hours before this meeting. I think that this particular policy needs to be set aside and you need to discuss it next month on your agenda. Some of the things that, I have questions on, will this apply to Paseo Nuevo's public parking? The city owns that, but the people that are running that particular program right now actually have an automatic license plate reader, and they are scanning all of the license plates, and we do not know what or how they are using them for. We don't know if they're selling the information, etc. Regarding this data that we're collecting, though, we don't have a specific policy statement in here that we will not actually share this information with ICE or any other agency that is using this data to target immigrants. The ACLU has determined that many public parking ALPR systems are being accessed by law enforcement agencies for that use. And we need to prohibit that now, and that's not in this policy. There is also a number of other issues regarding the ability for residents to actually have this audited. You can audit this without actually providing the license plate number. So we don't have a mechanism for the public to see how many times the staff is actually accessing this information and what it's being accessed for. We don't have information on a policy statement in here that says that we are not going to deploy hot lists or geofencing for the police. We don't have a statement in this particular policy that actually ensures that we are going to have a manual for training posted on the website, a certificate of completion of any testing, and we also don't include the person's name of the staff member who is actually running a report. So there's a lot of holes in this policy, and it doesn't sound like this policy is going to be put in front of the Harbor Commission or the Airport Commission before it goes to City Council. So there really has been a lack of due diligence in terms of seeking public comment and to really think about the types of things that we need to worry about. I would also just lay out here that we need an ordinance for this to be enforceable. BART has such a surveillance ordinance that incorporates all of these things into a robust program and automatic license plate reader policy. So I would really recommend that we take a step back, we review that, we actually look at the information that I sent to you, and that we actually get public comment. Because right now, the only member of the public that's probably read this is me. Because we just had a holiday weekend, and this document was not published at the time that the agenda was. It wasn't until Tuesday after 5 o'clock. Thank you.
Is expired. Thank you. Sarah, do we have any other members of the public wishing to comment?
Nobody else has their hand raised at this time.
Thank Staff, did you want to comment on the Paseo Nuevo matter with regards to, I mean, if I'm correct, they are a private lot, but they're required to mirror our rates as far as city parking fees, but they are a private lot? And the Hotel California would be the same scenario?
I'll start out and then, you know, if there's anything left. So we do get a lot of compliments for Paseo Nuevo from the public. They thank us for that. And then we, you know, I don't know, depending on the person, we point out, actually, we don't operate that. And we've actually been looking at the success that they've been having with LPR as a customer service tool and really liking it quite a bit. As far as the collection of data, you know, it's a private operation and they don't have to subscribe to the same rules that we're applying for in the LPR policy. So, Ms. Clark, do you know of any details about their policy in information disclosure?
I do not. The policy we're proposing today, again, only applies to airport, waterfront, and public works departments. It does not apply to Paseo Nuevo, which is a private operator of parking. Mr. Doimus could possibly give us some more legal background as to what Paseo Nuevo's obligations are with regards to ALPR data, but I'm not familiar with if they have a policy.
I'm not 100% certain on this issue, but if they are the private entity running it, then they have their own private responsibilities to follow this. Not under the city does not have control over that issue. They are the ones in charge of tasking what they run, how they run it, how they disseminate it, how they sell it, that information.
Thank you. Another couple comments. It was noted about manual or training, but I do see there's a specific paragraph in the policy that does require training for all people using the system to be trained and a record of completing that training. Is that correct?
That is correct. So training is required prior to anybody being given access to the system and then annually thereafter. You know, at this point, we don't have any sort of training manual, which Ms. Gott spoke to, because again, we don't have an actual system in place. We're adopting the policy first. So, you know, what that training actually looked like would be dependent on the specifics of any sort of system that was implemented and how that system actually worked. But the training is intended to make sure that all authorized users are understand what their requirements are under this policy for protecting user privacy and only using the data for authorized uses in an appropriate way.
And I recall another comment regarding, you know, audit of the system. If I recall, sorry, John, one moment.
Oh, sure. I'll wait.
That's all right. And I also recall, you can maybe handle both of these. And I also noticed that we have a requirement it logs in anytime someone accesses the system. So that information of who is reviewing that is being kept.
Yes, that information is captured and the policy requires us to periodically audit that information. It requires the program manager to do that. The policy doesn't specify a staff person's name. I believe that Ms. Gott made a comment to that effect as well. And that's because obviously our staffing can change. So we just specify the position of the person who is responsible for that. But they're responsible for reviewing that and making sure that the only people who are accessing the system are authorized users, and that when they do that, they're only doing it for authorized purposes. So all that information is captured.
Understood.
Or would be captured per the policy.
John, did you have a comment?
And I just wanted to go back. I just wanted to make sure on the Civil Code. The question of Paseo Nuevo. So the Civil Code applies to public agencies. So in terms of how they operate it. So the fact we own it, but who's operating it is a private entity. So it would not apply. So to piggyback off what I said, it's their responsibility of how they do that. But this is about public agencies operating their lots, and that's why we are going through this process of developing the policy and the requirements of that policy in the Civil Code.
And John, while you're still there, don't go away
Sure.
yet. Could you comment? Can you comment on the issue of police access, obtaining? I think you did earlier, but maybe a little more.
Sure.
On who actually can get this data and how they go about it. Supposed to
Sure. Yes, I'm pulling up the section under the policy. So I think it's on page, give me 1 second. It's page 4, where under the heading of releasing ALRP data. It's the second paragraph underneath the bullet point. City shall provide the data to law enforcement agencies if subpoenaed by a court or other public agencies. So that includes ICE, everything else. They are all law enforcement agencies. Just simply requesting it is not enough. They need a warrant or to do so by a court. We would not just do it off of a request of courtesy.
Understand. Thank you.
And to be clear, they wouldn't have sort of live or real-time access to that information. So only people in the authorized departments have it, which at this point does not include any law enforcement agencies. So, as Mr. Doimas said, a law enforcement agency who wanted to access that would have to have a subpoena for an investigation.
Can I ask John a question? Is our policy not releasing data without a warrant? Is that standard in the industry, or are there potentially jurisdictions that don't have that protection? So you may hear of those problems, but ours is going farther to clarify that.
Chair Pinner, yes, there's no requirement under the Civil Code in terms of what you can or what you cannot share. So some agencies may choose to be restrictive on it, and some may not. As we say, we're being very restrictive and understanding the privacy protections, even requiring our own police department to go through that. So it's not a requirement under the code, but the policy is geared to protecting people's privacy interests.
So you could hear about it, you could read about it happening, but would not happen under our scenario with the proposed language in our ordinance.
Correct.
Thank you. Mr. Newkirk. And before Mr. Newkirk, can I make one thing? I think I need to close public comment. Correct? No more.
Let me just check. I don't see any other raised hands right now.
Okay, so I'll officially close public comment. Thank you. Mr. Newkirk.
Thank you, Chair Pinner. This is I have another kind of question about that second paragraph of the releasing ALPR data. That first sentence says, references law enforcement agencies needing a subpoena, but then the second part of that sentence says, or other public agency that has the legal authority to require the release. And so there's no reference to a warrant or subpoena for those other public agencies. And I'm curious what agencies those might be, and if someone could elucidate that, that'd be great.
Sure, that's a question for Mr. Doimas.
Sure, getting myself ready. It could not necessarily be what you would, in the sense, think of a law enforcement agency. It could be Attorney General's office, District Attorney's office. So that's why they consider part of the prosecution team. If they would want those records, that would be an example of such. So if the District Attorney's office came to us saying we would want those records, we would require the same requirement as we do for law enforcement agencies.
But there's no reference to like a subpoena or anything for those agencies. Like the way the sentence is written.
What you and we would like to hear comments and all that. So if we'd like, I would make that even stronger, that sentence. I can definitely do that to reference making sure that it's through and through. I definitely take that recommendation. Thank you.
Can I, Mr. Newkirk, or what you're saying, that no law enforcement agency or any other public agency would be allowed without subpoena?
Yeah, unless there's a valid subpoena or warrant. I don't know exactly what the language would be, but make sure that everything has like the highest scrutiny, or basically anytime we're giving it up, we're being required under law, under a subpoena, or whatever the language is. I mean, I defer to the attorney.
Sure. I understand what you're trying to say, that making sure that any public agency, whether it be law enforcement or otherwise, must obtain a subpoena or a warrant to obtain the records. I will make that change.
So let's hold that note until we go through a recommendation.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely.
We might take that up. So we've closed. we're going to questions of staff. Does the committee have any other questions to staff? Seeing no cameras turn on. Okay, thank you. Then I believe at this time you're seeking a motion to move this policy, the proposed policy, to council for their review and adoption. We've had one comment from Mr. Newkirk about the language in paragraph on page 4, paragraph releasing ALPR data. So I don't know if someone is prepared to make a motion. And if not, I'll do so myself. I would make a motion to forward the recommendation of the automated license plate recognition policy to the city council for adoption with modification to the paragraph in releasing ALPR data to include law enforcement and all other public agencies require a subpoena. And at this time, I'll entertain a second.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion regarding the motion.
Yeah, Chairman, I guess it's not directly related to the motion, but just before we move forward with it, I do want to note that I'm quite sympathetic to Ms. Gott's comments about the timing of the release of the policy. I think that's something we should discuss moving forward, especially when we're making recommendations to council. Is to, the idea here is that we vet fully things so that council can have a smooth time with things. So I think it's important that there's adequate time to review those things. I'll be comfortable moving forward with this because I think it was fairly short. I think we've talked about some important things, but I think it is a really valid point for our committee moving forward to have, I would say, at least 72 hours for any documents that we're moving forward to council. And I think releasing them with the agenda would really be the ideal approach.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Newkirk. We can have staff comment on that in our updates if necessary. Any other comments regarding the motion? Seeing none, we have a first and a second. We'll call for the roll call vote, please. Do we, sorry, before I do that, do we need, I guess I should, it's hard to do this on camera. We're clear on the motion, so I don't know if we need to read it back.
It would be helpful to read it back.
So I'm going to have you do that, Mindy.
All right. To move forward with a recommendation to propose the policy to council for review and adoption with a modification to include law enforcement and other agencies require a subpoena. This is on page 4 of the policy.
Thank you. That accurately reflects the motion. Roll call, please.
Committee member France,
Approve.
Sean Pratt,
Yes. Approve.
Andrew Newkirk,
Yes.
Matt Labrie,
Yes.
and Chair Pinner.
I vote in the affirmative.
Thank you.
Thank you, staff. I know this was a heavy lifting item you've been working on. I did want to note Mr. Dayton's comment about how many positive feedback we get about the system in the Paseo Nuevo lot. So I think this is a good step moving us forward to getting those good recommendations, hopefully in all our lots at some point. Okay, my agenda. Where did I set my agenda? There we go. Item 7, parking operations review and expenditure updates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And also, I do want to thank Brian Bossy and his team at the waterfront and the airport teams also for that last item. And waterfront really took the lead on that, so that was really nice. For the next item, this is an item that's reoccurring. Parking operations, revenues, and expenditure updates. We want to engage with the committee and keep the committee apprised of operations since COVID began and our financial issues began with that COVID. We have a lot of people who are not coming down at this time, clearly because of the governor's orders for shutting down, but then also there is quite a bit of uncertainty as to what will be the demand after the COVID season has passed. So we are trying to be diligent to bring this item to you so that we can process it with you as we go from month to month and make decisions accordingly. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton. So as he mentioned, this is our monthly update for the committee about where we stand just for the month of August versus the month of August. In this case, we're going to look at last year. So we've continued to see significantly depressed revenues. Last year, obviously, we came in a lot higher in August, so we're down about 61%. This year, we didn't have the Fiesta revenue, which is normally a large source of revenue for us in August. We continue to see a lot of cancellations in monthly and commuter permits, and we'll go through that. And our occupancy has remained about the same as it was in July. Bringing in around about $4,000, $3,800 to $4,100 each day out in the parking lots. Expenditures for this month are less than we spent last year, obviously because we've significantly reduced our hourly staffing and are still just operating on that holiday schedule. But they're a lot higher than they were last month, and that's because we had a one-time appropriation of the funds for the ski day upgrades, which we talked about at the last meeting. So that was around about $300,000. So you'll see that in the transfer to capital being a lot higher this month than it would normally be. And just as it happens, last year in August, we also had a large one-time transfer to capital, which is for the EV charging stations. So just be aware that as we're looking month to month, it's hard to necessarily make a lot of firm conclusions just because our expenditures and revenues can vary significantly if there are those big one-time things. So again, we came in about 61% under for revenue for August versus where we were this time last year, and about 28% under for expenditures. So the net of that for operating, we are operating at almost $300,000 in the red, so relying on reserves to cover that gap. And then after we make that transfer to capital and that capital appropriation, we used about $607,000 of our reserves for the month of August. So next slide. And here's some of the data that tells that story about the decrease in revenues. Again, this is the lot occupancy for August of this year versus August last year. This year, you're looking at the line in the orange. So, it's a pretty clear tale. This is about what we saw last month as well. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Same situations for revenues. This time last August for the hourly revenues, we collected about $460,000. This past month for this year, only about $120,000. So again, similar story to last month. Next slide, please. And then again, permit subscriptions continue to decrease. We're off about 44% from last year on our commuter subscriptions, on our monthly parking subscriptions. This includes people who've canceled as well as people who've placed permits on hold, and so they're not currently paying for those. And we are continuing to see those decline from last month as well. Last month is the first month that we resumed billing. So as people started to get bills again and realized they still had a permit subscription, we did kind of get another wave of those cancellations. Next slide, please. And so big picture, where does this leave us in terms of our reserves? If we're continuing with the, if every month hereafter looked like August, we would end the year having used about $3.7 million of our reserves, which does dip into those council policy reserves fairly significantly. And we would be left with about 1.9 million reserves on the books at the end of the fiscal year. Again, this can change a lot. We're just looking month by month based on how we did that month, what we would project out. We do expect that, the situation with COVID and the business climate will continue to change as we move forward and hopefully improve. But again, we're just kind of looking at this based on the information that we have right now. So that's all I have for you. If Mr. Garza or Mr. Dayton want to add anything to that, or if the committee has any questions, let me take those.
All right, thank you. Mr. France.
Chair Pinner, thank you. Sarah, thank you for that. On that last slide, in terms of our reserves, what's our required reserve?
Required reserves.
With the dollar amount.
It varies, first off. So that number actually changes because it's a percentage of our budget. So I want to say it's around 3 million. But I would have to double check. I can get you that information.
So basically through this crisis, we might go below what's our required reserves, or we're getting into that territory?
Correct. We very likely are going to go. And part of that is what for. It's disaster reserves, and this is certainly a disaster. So we've got disaster reserves, we have contingency reserves and required capital reserves. So all together, those are our council policy reserves. And we will be very likely dipping below that line.
Thank you, Mr. France. Any other questions from the committee of staff? Okay, seeing no cameras turning on. Thank you, Sarah. It's obviously a tough economic situation for us all, including our area here in parking, and we hope to see a change in that at some time, and we appreciate you keeping us up to date on that information and what's happening.
Yeah, and again, those sort of year-end projections are going to shift around month to month. If you look back at last month, it's a bit less rosy than last month was, but next month it could improve, just depending again on what we see in that particular month. So it's really a fluid situation. And I don't know if you want to take any public comment, but just a reminder.
Okay, Mr. France, did you have another question?
I have a comment.
Yes, please.
Should we do public comment on this and then I'll do comment?
Sure. We can open up public comment at this time. Do we have any speakers wishing to comment on this item?
I'm not seeing any right now. If any member of the public wishes to speak, you can go ahead and use that raise your hand button.
Thank you. We'll continue while we leave that open for a moment. Mr. France, you can go ahead with your question.
Great. Thank you, Chair Pinner. I've said this before, but I will say it again. I think, especially in light of the discussion that we just had, this is a really significant situation. We knew that we were going into a tight financial situation absent any crisis. And so I think it's just so important that we empower our staff to both think out what our business plan needs to be in terms of expenses and income. And, so often in Santa Barbara, we move really slowly. Things that are standard in other cities or even other parts of our own city, we have a lot of reluctance about. And I just, if we're going to maintain this system, which was, a real gift, in terms of all the capital that we inherited through, through the years, through programs that no longer exist, like the redevelopment agency, in order to maintain that, our staff really need to be empowered to do what they're doing. And we're going to have to think differently than we have in the past, both in terms of expense and in terms of our business plan for income. And so I really just can't express enough how important it is that we have flexibility in how we manage the system, because we have super capable staff. And I so appreciate Sarah, Rob, and Victor, and all of the downtown parking staff for how you all are managing this. And you're being very nimble. And we, as a committee, I think, need to continue to empower that.
I concur with those comments, Mr. France. Thank you. We can't hear you, Sarah, but I think you said that we don't see any other public comment. And so at this time, I'll close public comment.
Thank you. Sorry, I had a little muting issue here.
That's okay. It's easy to do. All right. With that, we'll move on to, unless there's any other comments, we'll move on to item number 8, Downtown Plaza activity updates. And I see Mr. Dayton is going to give that to us.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and we do appreciate Committee Member France's comments. The staff is fully engaged in creative solutions. We're talking about this. We are incredibly concerned about this. Although that is what the disaster or the emergency funding is for, it's hard to watch it go out the door so fast. So looking at the COVID numbers this morning, it's good that the California trend line is headed down pretty steeply, like the upside. So hopefully in the next months we'll see something from the governor, and we'll have a better understanding of what the post-COVID demand for parking will be like, and then make adjustments and work with you accordingly to what is the information we find out. So moving on to the last item, or rather item 8 in Downtown Plaza activity updates. I want to update the committee that the council has extended the emergency ordinance, the temporary emergency ordinance for outdoor dining activities. You will recall that this was done in May, and we first started our efforts. We've worked with this committee and let you know, giving you slide pictures of the evolution of that ordinance and all the things that have gone on State Street and Parklets, which downtown parking has led the drive on, creating guidelines, and really has been a leader in California in this. And I can't tell you how many calls we get that they want to know how we did it so fast. And it's been a balancing act. It's really been a balancing act between financial sustenance of businesses, which is part of the mission statement of this committee, and the balancing between health and safety. What we have done in the COVID season and what we've done on State Street has been nothing shy of remarkable. We have so much activity on State Street now than we've ever had in recent years. And but then how do you balance that with the COVID situation? Council re-upped that ordinance to mid-December and gave Paul Casey, our city administrator, another possibility of, on his authority, extending that 3 months. So that would go well into the next year. So that was a total of 6 months is on the table. What we are doing now because of that is if you'll recall, the original ordinance was supposed to end just this last weekend. And so we had planned and developed guidelines for that particular period. Now that we are going and extending it another 6 months, downtown parking is taking this opportunity to notice all people who are on State Street, and with the parklets, we're going to be noticing all of them of the extension, and we're taking that opportunity to get a little bit more dialed in with them and a little bit more forceful, if you will, on the guidelines that are required. So there's 3 elements to that. Probably the most important of those elements is ADA access, Americans with Disabilities access. Our access committee is very concerned about that and the temporary nature of that, seeing things like paths of travel, elevation changes, designated ADA table, which includes a certain height. There are a number of ADA requirements in our guidelines that are not being met citywide. So one of the things that we're going to do is begin to do a little bit more of a heavy-handed approach with the parklets and people who are on businesses operating on State Street who are not meeting those guidelines. We're going to have Mr. Garza is developing a kind of like an inspection sheet that can be handed to them that documents the request. One of the things we haven't done is we haven't documented every time we ask, hey, you need to do this, hey, you need to do that, which Mr. Garza and the team have been phenomenal at doing, but that doesn't mean that everyone complies every time you ask them. Now we'll be documenting when we've asked them, and then we're working with the attorney's office to develop some sort of penalty for those who do not follow through on those requests. It's very important that we accommodate all people who want to come to outdoor facilities, similar to what we would do when they're indoor. The next thing, so that was 1, ADA. The next thing is winterizing. Winterizing. Turns out winter's coming. And we have no idea what will happen. Will it rain? If it's going to be colder? What's the weather going to be like? So in the winterizing, there are 2 items that will complete the 3 that we're going to be talking to the public about. One is stormwater. There are a number of parklets that are constructed not according to the guidelines and did not accommodate the gutter being filled with water. So we are concerned about a certain number of those. We don't know what would happen. What will happen? It will really depend upon the rain event, how much rain we get. State Street in particular does not have a storm drain most of the way down it, and the street is the storm drain, and so that could present a big challenge for those that have parklets in the way of that drainage path. And so we want to put them on notice of the responsibility that they carry for blocking that path, and we want to specifically help individuals comply with the guidelines by speaking with them individually about what that might entail. But noticing people with that responsibility, and then the second part of that winterization, which is the 3rd item, is the people are going to, we anticipate people are going to want to put some sort of canopies. They'll want to put in some heat lamps. They'll do the typical thing that with outdoor dining in the winter season. So we are going to, we do not have a lot of guidelines on that, so we're developing some additional guidelines on canopy types and requirements for holding them down, and heating lamps, working with the fire department on that. As Mr. France pointed out, we want to continue to be nimble and flexible and accommodate business. That's the goal of the emergency ordinance, is to keep people in business, to keep restaurants afloat and other businesses afloat. But we also want to do that in a safe way. And so as we move these next 6 months, it's going to be a much different look than our summertime. We want to make sure that the people who are out there are accommodating and are following guidelines, and the public still is remaining safe in those. So the other thing that I'll have you note is that there is a subcommittee, a long-range subcommittee for State Street. And that is comprised of 3 council members. It's a subcommittee of the City Council. That's Snedden, Harmon, and Oscar Gutierrez, and they are working on the what people are calling, what is the next permanent design, or what is going to happen with State Street. That probably will end in some sort of capital project being developed by council, but they're really looking initially at what is the reason, why are we doing State Street? What is the next thing for State Street? What will the experience be? What will it what were some of the things that you would look like? Does it have art? Does it have playgrounds? Is it a park? Is it restaurants? Is it bikes and peds? Is it peds only? I think there is kind of this assumption in the community that we're seeing, that there's an assumption that vehicles will not return to the street. I was very kind of surprised by that, trying to keep the question open, and people are telling me, Rob, what are you talking about? No one wants vehicles back. I've heard that pretty profusely. We have a survey from the AIA, the American Institute of Architecture, a local, they did a survey of almost 5,000 people, and I think it's over 94% think that it should be closed to vehicles, or additional streets closed to vehicles. So not a lot of people thinking that vehicles should be on the street. So that committee is moving forward, and we will keep you posted on the activities. There may be something that subcommittee asks of the downtown parking committee in terms of your input. So we're looking for that opportunity to engage you on those decisions as well. And with that, I'll entertain any questions that you have about the oh, there's one more thing I wanted to mention is we do have another street closure. That's Helena for the Blue Water Grill. We got agreements from the businesses on the kind of the southerly half of Helena above Cabrillo to close the street to one-way traffic, and that is saving Blue Water Grill because they have very little area to have outdoor dining in their area. So with that done, answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton. And I appreciate you updating this. It's hard to think about winter right now, but we do need to be thinking about that. My daughter lives in Chicago right now, and she's actually helping on a task force to help them figure out how to do dining outside during the winter. So you think we have a hard time. Good news, we're not dealing with the Windy City weather. Does anyone of the committee have any questions of staff regarding this topic? Mr. Newkirk.
Well, I can't resist. But Rob, what are you thinking? Of course, no cars on State Street. I just want to add to the others. For the long range subcommittee, so that's going to, I assume that's like Brown Act because there's 3 council members. Is that something that we can sign up for notices about meetings? Are they going to have, beyond like asking, just as a, not representing downtown parking, but if people are interested in kind of tracking that in real time, is there a way to kind of follow that process?
There is. I'm trying to bring up the website now, but it's on the city council website. There on the city council webpage, there is a place for subcommittees.
Okay.
And I believe you can sign up for notifications at that location. Trying to find it right now.
And otherwise, just sounds good. You guys, it sounds like you guys are thinking about the right things moving forward and kind of keeping this momentum going in the changing season. So it'll be exciting to see kind of how things morph over time. And hopefully at some point we don't have to be morphing anymore.
It would be nice. It would be nice. I got to tell you, we in my career, we've never worked so much time because we have, we have operations in downtown parking, and then we have the other side, which is transportation planning in this particular division. But now we're operating, it seems like weekly, everything shifting, changing, so many moving parts. So the level of comments from the public and requests for the public and from businesses is through the roof. Just for an example, my email box is typically about 50 emails an hour, and that doesn't stop on the weekend. So we are highly engaged actively 7 days a week on these issues right now.
Great, thank you. Any other members of the committee? Mr. Labrie.
Mr. Chair, thanks. I just wanted to point out with regard to the State Street's future and the discussion going on, that historically this committee has taken an interest in the paseos and access from parking to state and to the side streets. And I would like to put a plug in for us speaking into this discussion about State Street's future, especially as it pertains to DPC's engagement in paseos and side streets. So Rob, yes, would love to be connected to that council subcommittee process. And I just want to plant that seed in the committee members' heads that to kind of consider, you know, our future role with regard to paseos and side streets, and that tying into that bigger conversation about what happens on state. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Labrie. And I do want to say, in response to your inquiry and Committee Member Newkirk's, there is a place to subscribe to the subcommittee. It's called the Downtown Long Range Planning Initiative Subcommittee. If you want to Google City of Santa Barbara, Downtown Long Range Planning Initiative Subcommittee, it's off the council webpage, and there's a button to subscribe.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton. And I think our committee is always, and you have responded in the fact that if there's opportunity that things are going before that committee that certainly could use our input, like Mr. Labrie just said, Mr. Newkirk and Mr. France may say in just a moment, we certainly would like to have that opportunity to have that input. Mr. France.
Thank you, Chair Pinner. If I could just make a quick comment, one of the items of change that's important, I think, to consider, especially over this next 6 months for the downtown plaza, is bike share. And it's great to see that B-Cycle, which I think pre-COVID was kind of getting ready to launch, is grouped up and staffed up, and our city is working with them, and I think that's going to be really crucial, actually, to increasing foot traffic and you know, eyes on the street, on State Street and throughout downtown. So I'm hopeful that, you know, all of the updates through winter and changes and are helping to accommodate bike share, because especially you know, with the absence of the trolley, bike share is going to be a really important way to just kind of maintain people kind of getting through State Street.
Yes, and I'll respond to that. In responding to Committee Member France, the bike share status is stalled at Historic Landmarks Commission. They're struggling with having bike share on State Street, and are pretty majority of those folks think it should not be, bike share should not be on State Street. Of course, that question will most likely be answered by council, but that's where we are on with that. So we're a little stalled on that. It's unfortunate, probably delayed it another month. We'll see how we're going back to HLC next Wednesday. So let's see if it breaks free at that point.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the update on the plaza. It's always very interesting these times to hear what's going on, which is a lot. So we need these updates monthly. We appreciate it. Unless there are any other comments, we'll move on to the last item, which is program updates.
Okay,
Mr. Chair. Hang on, Mr. Chair.
What?
You need to open public comment on the previous item.
Yeah, I didn't think we normally did it on this item, but very well. I will open up public comment
on every single item. So good catch, Ms. Clark. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll open up comment.
Okay, I don't see any hands right now. If anybody from the public wants to say anything, go ahead, use that raise your hand button. Give it another few seconds.
Again, usually we get to look at the public and they see us in the eye and we know it's time to speak. So with
I
this,
know, it's tough.
it's a lot more difficult. So I thank you for reminding me each time to do so.
No problem. We don't have anybody who's looking to speak right now.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. With that, we'll close public comment and move to item number 9, program updates.
Okay, Mr. Chair, we have a number of these, and I think Mr. Garza is going to be handling this.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton. Hopefully you can all hear me. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Parking Committee. We're going to go over some program updates real quick here. I'm going to start off with the access control system upgrades. Last month, as you recall, the committee voted to support the transfer of funds from our reserves to fund much needed upgrades to our parks revenue control system. Purchase order was issued to SCADATA, and they are scheduling the work to happen, hopefully be completed before the end of the year. And we're excited about that work starting. I'll leave the CIP update with Chelsea Swanson to the end. We recently consolidated the maintenance contracts for the landscape maintenance, for the custodial janitorial work, and the power washing in the parking garages and lots and the downtown plaza. We hired the 3 contractors, and they got started in mid-July. It was a little bit bumpy trying to get them all coordinated, and so far it's been going well. One part of the coordination that we had to work a little extra hard on was the coordination with the commercial street sweeping that is managed by the streets division. They had recently hired a new contractor, and then all of a sudden they were faced with all the barricades on State Street, and so there was a lot of coordination and man hours involved to get all that straightened out, and it seems to be going much better now. Recently we had a problem with the elevator at the Lobero garage, lot 9, which is next to Marshall's. That elevator experienced a sudden loss of hydraulic fluid, and then the motor burned up. So the elevator was unable to function at all. Elevator contractor was brought in to take a look at it, and we may be looking at a repair of upwards of $100,000 for that elevator repair. Apparently the telescoping jack that pushes the elevator up and down the shaft suffered a major packing failure, and so has to be completely rebuilt. So we anticipate that elevator will be down probably for another month at least. Chelsea, if you're around, would you please share an update on our capital with the committee?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. Just going to give you a brief update on capital projects. The city's currently in their 5-year CIP update citywide, so we'll be getting into the details with you in the next 2 months on our 5-year update for fiscal year 2022 to 2026. So stay tuned for that. I think Victor went over these last meeting, but I'll just mention really briefly, we recently wrapped up an electric vehicle charging station project on the roof of the Granada garage. I believe there's 30 EV chargers up there that are up and running now. We also have 2 chargers that are now up and running at lot 11. And then we also just wrapped up our cable barrier project in lots 2 and 10. So our main focus right now, I would say, is on the State Street Plaza and Measure C funded projects. We, as Victor mentioned, just wrapped up our landscape enhancement project last week, I believe, and are moving on to the maintenance portion of that. That didn't include tree replacements. That's a separate project that sort of fizzled in March. We got 12 trees replaced out of 36 on State Street, so we're getting that going again to get the rest of the trees in. So that will be happening soon. One project we're also working on the scoping for is to replace the planters that are currently out there at each intersection with the palm trees in them. There's, I think, 2 in each side of the intersection. A lot of them are falling apart and look rather temporary. So we're working with traffic engineering staff. They're working on a design to kind of refine what this longer term design should look like for each intersection. And so we want to beautify and enhance the look with new planters. So something we're working on. We're also scoping a plaza string light project, and we've been looking at how to attach string lights across State Street. Probably we're going to use the existing flag brackets that are you see on the street lights and the traffic signals. So the goal would be to do a demonstration on the 11 and 1200 blocks for that. And Victor may have something to add about that one. We're doing ongoing brick repairs on State Street on as needed basis. And we do have, we need to revisit a stonework project that was scoped for the 500 block when we had the fountains removed. We had a contractor on board earlier in the year, but they unfortunately have been unresponsive, so we have to go out to bid on that again. And then lastly, if the budget allows, our next phase for electric pedestal replacements would start on the 700 block of State Street. That's all I have for you for now. Let me know if you have questions.
Thank you. Any members of the committee have any questions regarding program updates or comments? Mr. Labrie.
Yeah, more of a comment to staff with regard to the lighting project. I want to convey that the downtown organization and different merchant discussion groups are really hoping that that project moves forward quickly. And maybe there is some more pilots or tests that can start soon as the daylight hours are shortening. And it's all really around the idea of what can we do to help business through the winter. So, you know, as the Downtown Plaza crew thinks about, and maybe Victor, you already have a date in mind to put the Christmas lights back up on the trees. But all of that kind of together is going to help businesses do better in the late hours of the day. So just want to throw that out that the community would like to see that be a priority.
Mr. Chair, Chairman, Chairperson Labrie, yes, we're planning on putting the Christmas lights, the string lights that go around the trunks of the trees in October, like we always have. And as Chelsea said, we are moving forward also with a string lighting project that crosses the streets. We have been working with different ideas on how to attach them, and so we're going to be using the existing flag brackets. Now we're trying to figure out the type of guy wire, the way to attach them, and we should be seeing lights up there within a couple of weeks, and then hopefully the bigger project will be going out to bid before the end of this month.
Thank you, Mr. Garza. Any other comments from the committee regarding program updates? Ms. Clark.
We do have one request for public comment. So if you're ready to open public comment, we do that.
This time we'll open up public comment.
Okay, so Anna Marie Gott has her hand raised. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you.
Good morning again. I hope this is the proper place in which to make a public comment on this. It does relate to State Street. And the fact of the matter is that the State Street, as well as our sidewalks, is owned by the public. And while I understand in this particular time that we do need to try to accommodate the restaurants and allow them to serve food outside, I think that's really incumbent upon the downtown parking committee, as well as other boards, to recognize that that land belongs to the public. And right now we are not being compensated for a taking, basically, of public space for private dining. And moving forward, should we actually, close off any portion of State Street or any other street, we need to ensure that we get proper compensation for any restaurant or anyone else that is actually operating in public spaces. Right now, what we're doing, if we, do not charge sufficient rent for that space, is that we are simply giving property owners the ability to keep rents high or to actually increase rent, because now a business will have an indoor operation and an outdoor operation that is quite large. And that outdoor operation is essentially free and probably is going to be only available to the businesses that are directly in front of it and not other businesses or pop-ups. So I just would like to, you to consider that and to make sure that when you're discussing things moving forward regarding outdoor dining and the use of public spaces, that we actually put a value on those public spaces, because we are taking land that was used for pedestrian sidewalks or for vehicles, and we're closing it off for those uses. Thank you very much.
For your comments. Are there any other public requests to public to speak?
Mr. Chair, I don't see any other hands raised.
Thank you. We'll close public comment on item 9. Staff, I'll let you, if you wish at this time, to comment, but I believe that type of concept of looking at the public lands is sort of beyond the emergency ordinance issue, as opposed to what we're under now being in a more emergency ordinance. So obviously, if this were to continue further, those discussions about public land will be addressed. Any other comments regarding program updates from staff? Okay. Seeing none, are there any announcements?
Mr. Chair, I don't believe there are any announcements.
Okay. Well, thank you. Well, assuming we're still be in this mode for video for a while, I appreciate all the members of the committee that are joining us this way, and all the staff. You're quite used to this now, I'm sure. Unfortunately, we're used to it. I did want to remind the committee that we are going into the process of openings for members to join the committee that through the city council. This is a city council advisory committee, and they appoint the members to this committee, and that time is upon us. So if you know of folks that you think would be appropriate to join this committee and helpful, please do so. All right. Without any other announcements from staff, we will move to item 11. 5 minutes behind, but close enough, and we are officially adjourned. Thank you all, and thank you staff, and thank you public, and thank you members of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.